This is the gift of being a human being. Is the ability to experience yourself as truth, as love, as compassion. So, karma comes in many different formats according to different lineages and different traditions. They speak about it in different ways. Let's call it, in science, it could be seen as cause to effect, but cause to effect through interconnectivity, which means it's not one directional. So if you look at Newtonian science, that would be cause equals effect, linear. It's one line of force, it's one motion, it's in one direction. Whereas with quantum physics, they see it as entanglement, which means this cause can have many effects, and many causes can have one effect. But it goes in all directions, which means it's almost like a pebble in a pond. And the more pebbles you throw in, the more interference, ripples, starts clashing with each other and causing secondary ripples. So everything starts interacting with each other. That's a more, I would say, more real explanation for me personally, just because that's how I experience it. For certain people that are not, it's not that there's something wrong with them, they're just not that conscious yet, or aware of all of the levels of interaction that they have in life. So they don't necessarily see the knock-on consequences of things. They just see it as, I did this and this is the consequence. They don't see how they impact on everybody else, or how everybody else is impacting on them doing that thing in the first place. So for them it's a very clear-cut, this is the cause, this is the effect, which is very Newtonian mindset, basically, old order science. So in a lot of religions, they see it this way as well. So they see it as you are punished for the actions you did, but not taking in consideration that those actions were not necessarily even catalyzed by you. They were just the consequence of something else happened that you responded to. But everything has consequences. So see it as something happens, and because this thing happens, many other things happen. Also, many things happen that builds up to create one thing. So it goes in both directions. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm explaining it really in wide terms right now because I want to give you a little bit more fuller understanding. So when people talk about past life karma, for instance, that's adding another dimension. It's adding past life. Now, when you start going into that, you really need to understand karma first, really, before you go into things like past life karma. But if you think about just what we've said so far, that there is something that happens and it has multiple consequences for every single thing around your space. Like I can change my breathing, which can change my heart rate, which can change your heart rate and your breathing as well. Just by me changing my breathing. It's that instant. And as soon as you do that, the whole space changes. When the space changes, everything around it changes. Animals start responding in a different way. The weather patterns change. So everything has a knock-on effect on everything else. You're not isolated. You're not living in a bubble. Everything is connected. So karma is almost like when people say you deal with your karma or you've got negative karma and something like this. It's like some things create consequences that either you could not have foreseen, which is called ignorance. It means not knowing. So you do something and you don't know what the consequences are going to be. Like when you're especially on a healing path or on a spiritual path, self-discovery on any level, you have to go through certain things where you're going to have to make mistakes because you don't know any better. You have to kind of find your way. Being a parent, perfect karma. It's like you don't know what to do. There's no real handbook. I mean, there's many books about how to raise a child, but really how to do it? How to make those decisions in those moments which just seems impossible? These are things you have to make mistakes. You are going to make mistakes, which means you can just as well make peace with the fact that you're not perfect. Make peace with the fact that you will make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. Make peace with that. But then take responsibility for the consequences. Because that's where most people are lacking, is they build up a certain amount of karma. It could be positive or negative, but they don't deal with the consequences. They don't deal with the knock-on effects in the right way. So I've heard this recently, just this, why it's coming to my mind, but somebody has said when they were younger, they were really naughty, like a really naughty boy. Like they did everything wrong. And then they got this reputation for being this naughty boy. But then when they realized that actually they can't go through life like that, they changed. But then people were still treating them as if they're a naughty boy, but they've not been doing any of these things. And what they didn't understand is now they're getting upset, but I didn't do it this time. I'm like, yes, but you did it every other time, which means the knock-on consequences of that, it's almost like every time you repeat an action, you're building a, let's call it an information body, like a coding. You're adding another layer of code to the same pattern, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And when people look at you, that's what they see. They don't see what you're doing now. They're seeing this code, which is so strongly leaning in this direction, that it doesn't matter whether you do that or that or that, they're going to see this. Because this is where most of the code is stored. So it's almost like when you have a really bad feeling about somebody and you don't know why, and your intuition just tells you, don't trust this person. But they're doing everything right. They're literally doing everything right, but you just go like, something doesn't feel right. It's because there's something back there in their matrix, in their information coding, that's been corrupted, that's not being taken full responsibility for. Which means there's something in them that's not in alignment. There's no coherence between what it is that they used to be and what they are now. So transformation is good, change is good. We all change, we all have to go through this process, and it's a good thing to change. But you have to change with the whole of you, not just some parts of you. Because then you're leaving, again, pieces behind. And all those pieces will keep dragging you back, going like, no, come back, you're not done here yet. That's why a lot of people in business, they start a business, business fails. Start a business, business fails. Because they've not dealt with the things that is making it fail all the time, which is a part of them that's sabotaging it. Because there's a part of them they've not dealt with. So, I'm giving you a lot right now. Is any of this making sense? Yeah? Okay, good. So, the thing with karma is it's not instant. It's accumulation. It's entangled, which means I could have resolved a karma. Say, for instance, I made a mistake in my life. Say, I lied about something. I lied about something and I've paid the price. I have paid the price so many times for that one lie that I told, and I've lost everything in the process, and I've rebuilt my life, and I've served the community. I've done everything, but I told this lie. And the thing is, until all of the people that are connected to that lie, and the people that they are connected to, that's also connected to that lie, and the people that they're connected to, and all of the experiences and the amount of time that was added to how long that lie was playing out, all of that goes together, and it has to be untangled and dissolved, which takes a lot of time, because it means I'm not only clearing my own memory and my own karma, I have to also deal with your memory and your memory and your memory of that moment in time that was not true. That was a lie. Which means I've corrupted your files as well, not just mine. Does that make any sense? So everything has such huge consequences, really, if you look at it from that perspective. And it can go, this is too overwhelming, I don't want to live anymore, because how do I do anything with creating chaos? How do I do anything in life without causing harm? And it's part, I think, of a natural process, is once you really start going very deep into all of the traumas, into forgiving yourself for the mistakes you've made, into going into all of the things in your life where you've hurt somebody else, actively or passively, knowingly or not knowingly, there comes a point where you go, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I just want to make it stop. I'd rather stop existing than to create more harm, because you realize how much harm you're causing yourself and other people every single day. And you don't even realize it, which is the saddest thing. So it's only once we really go inside and deal with all of those things that we don't know, the parts of ourselves that we don't know, the parts of ourselves that are still hurting from traumas or things that other people maybe did, and going through the process of finding forgiveness, finding acceptance, and finding peace. Because those things are all linked to you. They may not necessarily be your fault. They could have been because of somebody else, that you've made certain decisions or you've responded to certain things, maybe in a horrible way. But it was triggered on some level and you didn't have control over it. Or you did. Maybe you did have control. It doesn't matter. But learning to forgive yourself sets you free as well as the other person, as well as everybody else that's connected. Because it's only once you can truly forgive yourself for not knowing any better, or for knowing and not having the energy to respond in the right way, or for being so worked up about something else that it affected that moment in time when you could have been more clear. There's so many different ways in which we can mess up. Like we do it all the time. But if you can forgive yourself, that instantly takes that charge of center point guilt, center point fear, center point anger, center point whatever that is, that creates the oppositional force that keeps feeding this duality, that keeps things stirring and uncomfortable. So if you could just step out of it for a second and come back to this moment now, here, where none of that exists, and you put your attention and your focus here, going, yes, I didn't know in the past, but now I see. I see what's real, right in front of me, right here, right now. This is real. Not all of that. This is real. And the more you bring your mind and your focus back to this now, everything else seems less important. It just kind of dissolves. It just kind of falls away in time. But we get very attached to the things that are pulling us either this direction or this direction. So yes, sometimes it's necessary to understand these two sides because we need to see how they interplay, to also know how to sometimes guide other people through it, especially if you're a parent. If you're a parent, you will have to learn how to deal with this internally because you'll have to spot it in somebody else when they're doing the same thing and know how to guide them out of it. Whereas if you don't recognize it, it's still ignorance because you don't know, which means then you're just living in naivety. You don't see the full reality. You're living in the present moment, but you don't see the full moment. You see just this, I almost want to say this rose-colored, everything is beautiful. You don't see the suffering. Whereas if you're really seeing the suffering and you've lived through that suffering and you've learned how to work through that suffering, work through the forgiveness, work through the acceptance, to a point where you receive gratitude, because then you see how everything fits together. Because once you resolve that thing that's been keeping you stuck, that thing that keeps you looping around the center point, but not the center point, it keeps you going around it. As soon as that thing lifts, it's almost like it's like a domino effect. Everybody else around you has the same consequence where they're all waking up to something that's just shifted. And it happens like this. It literally happens in a second. So everybody you're connected to has some form of connection to you, whether it is to that one part of you that is not resolved, that is in anger, or one part of you that's still living in guilt, or one part of you that's still whatever it is. But people are linked to you because of that part of you, and they will keep being drawn back into your life until that completely dissolves. Then new people will come, and new attachments will form. New patterns will create. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we're constantly going through a process of being born, going through life, dying, rebirth, life, death, rebirth, death. This is normal. This is what we're here to do on planet Earth. We go through many, many, many experiences to understand how this, all of this, existence itself, fits into this. Where's our place on planet Earth? Knowing that we are all of these things as well. We are pure breath, we're pure spirit, we're pure light. But how does that work in physical 3D form? Because this is where we need to learn to simplify, to narrow down, to come back to the essence through manifestation, because that's how we see what has manifested. That's how we see what we've created on the other levels, whether it was really an illusion or if it's actually a real reality. If you manifest something in your life that is in harmony and flow, it means your understanding of life is correct. Otherwise, there's some form of illusion in there. There's some form of a resistance or something that you're not seeing yet, because it keeps creating more conflict. If you're drawing in conflict, how you respond to that conflict is just as important, because it doesn't mean that you're creating conflict because you're in conflict. It could be because you are in peace that you attract those in conflict in order to find peace. They're drawn to you to find the peace that you have. You pull them in.